Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Elevate Your Running podcast. I'm so excited for this week's episode because I have a special guest, and I actually get to coach Meg on the regular. We have Meg here with us today. She is a runner, she is a mother, and so much more. She works full time, she is a wife, and she's an incredible human being. And there's going to be a really great conversation around how she started running. She took some time away from running, and then what that felt like when she came back to it after having kids, and all the things that she feels, all the things that she's going through. And I think this is going to be a really awesome, relatable episode. So I'm so excited to be here today with Meg. Hey, Meg, how's it going?
Good. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me on.
You're welcome. It's so fun to have you. And we're going to kick it off old school way. And it should still be the same way every week, but it does feel a little bit different just doing this solo now. So we're going to kick it off with an elevated moment. Meg, I'd love to hear an elevated moment from you.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know, I'm like smiling ear to ear because I'm so happy to be here and talking about one of my favorite things in the whole world, which is running. And I just feel like I had the best week of running. I just had so much gratitude for being able to run outside and enjoy nature and listen to a lot of inspiring podcasts. I just feel like, marathon season is kicking off. We've had a lot of the majors recently, and there's just been so much incredible content that I like can't get enough of because it's so inspiring. And so I just feel like all of that is my elevated moment boiled down into one.
I love that. I think that's so cool. And this time of the year is definitely a very inspiring time. I think spring racing brings out everyone, maybe people who have been running, who've been training consistently. It could also be bringing out new runners into the space, or for someone to be inspired to say, hey, I want to sign up for my first marathon this fall. Like, all the things. It's such a cool place to be. It's such a cool, inspiring place to be. And I'm so glad that you're feeling good while running too, because
Yes.
you had quickly, like you had an amazing, an amazing season. So Meg lives in Florida, so her training season looks a little bit different than maybe what mine looks like, or maybe what you as a listener looks like. But she had an incredible season. We started working together like late last summer, right? It was like
Mhm.
September-ish,
September.
August. Yeah, September. And we went right into like 10K training, half marathon training. You ran two 10Ks, you ran two half marathons, and your season's over. You're in base phase right now, which is like incredible. And so like the motivation too to continue when you're in kind of in that like season lull. We kind of talked about that a little bit here a few weeks ago. Like it's really like leaning into that why of like what's next. And Meg gets to fall right back into the like typical training season for everyone else. And what do you have going on this fall?
I am so excited because I'm running a major. I'm running the
Yeah,
Chicago Marathon, which I have heard from a certain someone that is a 10 out of 10
it's a
and an
10 out of
amazing race. So I'm really, really excited, even though that does mean training through the Florida summer. But I know that will make me a much stronger runner, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's so exciting because it's your first major, and it's your first it's not your first marathon. You've run one
No, I
before.
mean,
Yeah.
I'm calling it my first marathon, which we'll get into, but it's
Yeah.
my first one in 6 years. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So it kind of feels that way. I know
yes.
I had like almost a 2-year gap between marathon one and marathon two. And when I ran marathon two, which got to be Boston in the fall of 21, I was like, it was like first marathon feels and nerves and all the things. And then you have like Boston on top of it,
Yeah.
which is like, there's like some added pressure there. And and it's wild, but you have a really good amount of time to train. And I think I'm very confident in what you can do in Chicago. And Chicago is that like 10 out of 10 race weekend. For anyone who maybe ran Boston or London, maybe you ran Tokyo earlier in the year, like some of the majors can be very overwhelming with a lot of the logistics, especially Boston. You have to get on a bus. You're up 5, 6 hours before. You're on an hour bus ride. You're just like, at least this year, you're just like baking in the sun before like going into the pre-crowd. What's so great about Chicago is that there are a gazillion hotels right near like the start and finish line in Grant Park. So you start and finish in the same location. You get you can get a better night's sleep, or you get to sleep in a little bit longer and then don't have, you don't have like that 5 hour gap that you would have maybe in other majors. So there's so many wins. And what I love so much about Chicago, um, is really the crowd and the energy with the crowd, because as someone, Meg and I are very similar. Like we're introverted. We're not like really we're not into like big crowds. I thought Chicago was like perfect. Like the perfect amount of spectators, perfect amount of noise and cheers, and like it's just so great. So I'm so excited for you to experience it and have a great day, right? Like you get to train through the heat, so that's going to be an awesome thing for you. And it won't be awesome in the moment, but it's definitely going to help you on race day, especially if Chicago's warm, you'll still be able to crush it. And if Chicago is cooler, then you're going to feel like $1,000
Amazing.
or $1,000,000, a
Yeah.
billion dollars, a
Yes.
billion dollars. There we go. Oh, that's so exciting. All right, we're going to chat more about that here in a minute. My elevated moment right now is really the love of the running community and being immersed in the majors in race season. And my athletes have heard this, or people on the team. I send a weekly email out. And I think in one of those weekly emails, it was probably the first week of like, oh, wow, racing season is really starting, because I have like, there's just a lot of people racing and it's busy and it's a lot of fun. And it's also really, really inspiring. And it's like this 6 week block of just racing, race strategies, race recaps. Let's plan for fall. What's next? Bringing new athletes onto the team. It's like, it's just so much fun. And even though it's like a really strong and heavy 6 weeks of racing, I feel like this will be my fourth summer. Like the summer is just so busy because you have so many people training for fall races. It's one of the busier times, but it's also so exciting. And it's really fun to see people progress and have really strong process goals and find the wins. And even with Boston a few weeks ago, like those athletes really leaning into the process of all the things that they've won in that race, which the outcome wasn't really the win, maybe the outcome of finishing and crossing the line, but finding so many wins along the way that we can take into fall season, which is really, really exciting. So it's a very motivating time to be a coach, which is so fun and great. Right. Here. Let's get into this week's episode. And Meg, I know we talked a little bit about like what you have coming up, but I would really love to hear like who you are. Like give a little bit more background to who Meg is as a human and as a runner, and kind of how you started running. Maybe describe your first run.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I had to really think through that because running's been a part of my life for so long. And I am very thankful for that because it really stems from my family. I had my uncle who helped raise me. He was an avid runner. I have very early memories of him coming back from runs, and I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and he would do legs up on the wall, and I would be there doing it with him. And I remember he and my other uncle were like, "Oh, let's do a 5K." And I was probably 8 or 9 years old, no training, nothing. Just went out there and jogged a 5K with my uncles. And I remember finishing and thinking, well, that was terrible and awful and so hard. And why did I do that? But then throughout my childhood, like just kept finding myself in these situations, like doing the grade school cross country meet or, wanting to make the soccer team in high school. So figuring on a whim, I'd go out for cross country to get in shape for soccer. And so running has been a part of my life for a long time. And I think that's a theme is that for a long time it was pretty inconsistent, like a lot of off and on. And I think that's
Mm,
because as a human, I have a lot of interest. I'm a very curious person by nature. I
mhm.
love to learn. I feel like I am that saying, a master of none, because I'm interested in everything. So I'm a little bit good at a lot of things. But I love reading and art and people and psychology. And I think that has fueled me in my career because I'm a marketing strategist full time, where I get to help brands dig into what their consumers really want and what makes them tick. And so I've pulled all of that. And I think now I'm a mom, I'm a wife. Um, and through that, I have been able to sort of shift my approach. And now I'm a more well rounded runner. And I think that has led me to be more consistent in all aspects of my life.
Oh gosh, that's so interesting. And
A
what do you
lot to
think it
unpack.
is that yeah, a lot to unpack, but what do you think it is about running that like pulls you back in with like, you mentioned not being really consistent and having a lot of other interests. I know it can be extremely tough to focus in on one thing when you do have a lot of hobbies and interests. What is it about running?
I love that running is so varied as a sport. There's so much that goes into it. I think
Mhm.
there's this misconception that you just need a pair of shoes and you can go out and run. And it's like you can, sure. But it's also there's the mental aspect, the physical aspect, there's community, there's how the competition side, whether that's competition with yourself or with others or with the clock. And then there's nutrition and where you're going to run. So if you love traveling or experiencing new places, I just feel like it running as I've gotten older, I realized has been sort of the gateway to allow me to tap into so many of my interests. And I love that about the sport.
That's so incredible. And you ran cross country and track in middle school, high school. Which one did you like the most as a younger Meg? And which one do you kind of thrive on now as like an as a current Meg?
Oh my gosh, this is hilarious. So I ran cross country and my high school was super competitive. I think when I joined the team, they had won the state championship 5 or 6 years in a row. And I joined and I was back of the pack. I could not compete. I was on like number 99 on 100. I would be running the 5K cross country races and being like, where's the next route that I can trip on and fall over so that I don't have to finish because this hurts so much.
Oh.
And I remember my freshman year, like I was a nobody. I was just out there. And I went out for track and field and I ran the 400 meter and I finished first and like beat a lot of seniors and juniors. And my cross country coach comes up and is like, where was this during cross country season? Like, what were you doing? I was like, oh, I can hurt for a 400 or an 800, but I don't want to hurt that long in a 5K. Which is so funny that now I'm a marathoner and a half marathoner. If my cross country
Yeah.
coach could see me now.
isn't that incredible? Like the evolution of the human and how like, you can kind of go into that pain cave as like a younger version of you, right? And now the pain cave in current version is just a little bit different, right? It's like you still get to go there in the half and the full for sure, but it's definitely different and not as intense.
And not as
I think
scary. I think that was it. It was like the anticipation of something hurting. When
mm,
you're younger, you're like, no, you're told your whole life, I don't want to hurt. Like, pain is, and not pain, but discomfort is not a good thing. And I think, being a mom now, going through labor and delivery, and seeing my kids and a lot of life experiences, it's like, oh no, discomfort is a part of life, and it's okay to feel that. And so I think now as a runner, it's like, oh, this is fine, this is normal. It's okay to like live in that space a little bit longer.
oh, wow. Yeah, that's really a cool way to describe like the shift. Because I know like sometimes when we get older, we want less and less discomfort, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe we've been there, done that, or we don't want to deal with it, or we have enough stress going on in every other aspect of our life. And we just want running to be not that. But if we can flip that script, or you and I've talked about this saying, like,
Mm-hmm.
change the song on the channel if you don't like what it's saying, right? Like, change the mindset around it and make it into something that can actually like help you get through it. That's a really cool place to be.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think again, that's why I love running, like the psychology of it, the mental aspect, and it can be and mean so many different things for so many different people, which is really
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, it all gets to be something different for each of us. It's one of the things I love most about running because it can mean the same and it can mean the same, it can mean things different for each
Hmm.
person. It also brings us all together, whether it's the same or different, right? Like you and I could be going to the Chicago Marathon. Spoiler alert, everyone. I am not, unfortunately, unless anyone knows where I can get a bib. I'm going to put it out there. Um, and we could both be wanting to be Q, right? But yet we could still have so many other things, process goals, other outcome goals that are just so different, or our training can look totally different. It could also look very similar. And it's one of the cool things about running, especially when you can find someone who is a little bit aligned with you, maybe a little bit not aligned with you, and like learn and grow from each other, but also help each other through it.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so true. Just that camaraderie that we're all sort of in it together. I mean, we saw that with the Boston Marathon a couple weeks ago. Everyone felt the heat. It was so hot, and
Yeah.
um, it was just incredible to see. That people had different goals, they had different race outcomes, but they all felt that together. And still felt that joy of crossing that incredible finish line. So, as an
Yeah.
outsider looking in, like that was so amazing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So amazing. And I think, you and I were both watching the race on ESPN and other sites. And I think it was like Sidious maybe that you were watching.
Mhm.
And it didn't look that bad, like during Boston, like with the elites. And then hearing all the stories and talking to all the athletes that I coached and just really how terrible it was out there, it's really something that is like a bonding moment for all of them. Because it did get pretty like wild out there. With a lot of people like needing medical assistance very early on and supporting each other through that and helping each other through that and just crossing the finish line, and like that is the win of the day, which is incredible.
Yeah.
So you ran cross country, you ran track in high school, you turned out to be this 400-meter track star. You're just so in love with like the short painful bursts of speed. And then you ran on and off through college. And then where did running take you after that?
Yeah, so after college, I moved to Washington, D.C., and I did not have a car, relied on public transportation. And so I remember it was like, oh, I want to go see the monuments and I want to do this. And I was like, well, I guess I'll just run there. So I started running to actually explore my new hometown. And I just really started to love it. And DC, I have to just rave about DC and the running culture there.
Hmm.
I mean, you can go to a running club in DC any day of the week. And as a young 20 something who had just moved there and knew no one, I met like my best friends at running clubs there. It
Oh.
was just I still look so fondly back at that time. And so I made friends. I got really involved with volunteering with the Girls on the Run organization there and started to sign up for races to raise money on their behalf, which was really fun. Ran the Cherry Blossom 10 miler, which I know you did this year, a few of the half marathons, and I just became almost addicted to like the sense of accomplishment that came with pushing myself to run further than I ever thought that possible, especially as a sprinter. I was like, no, I used to not even
Yeah.
want to run a 5K, and now I'm signing up for half marathons. And I not only that, but I had my friends, my social life was ingrained in running. And I think I went through, it was probably a 2 or 3 year period where I was training harder than I ever had before. I was running paces that I never thought I would run. I actually beat my 5K PR from high school. And it was just like this cycle of running nonstop. I mean, it was my whole life, my entire identity for a few years there.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of us can relate to that, whether it's a season or a few years, or Kenzie agrees, or years and years and years, where running endurance runners are very type A, right? And we definitely love that sense of accomplishment and everything that can come from that. And I think a lot of us can just relate to that, especially as a newer runner. And I'm going to say newer runner in that sense of endurance running,
Yeah,
because when you get into it, it's like PR city every day, which
it's
feels
amazing.
so great. Yeah, it's like, oh, wow, this week I ran, maybe more miles altogether, or I ran my longest long run, or, usually we're also running very fast all the time. So it's like, can I beat my time from yesterday? Or at least these were things that all went through my mind.
Oh, me
Did you
too.
find yourself, yeah, getting kind of caught up into that comparison with yourself and really wanting to like be better and do more every day?
Oh my gosh. It's so funny looking back. So I'm like, oh, I did everything that I feel like in 2024, we're talking about not doing. Like every run was way too fast. I wasn't fueling properly and it wasn't intentional. It was just like, I didn't know what your body needed.
Yeah.
And I remember like I said, I had a different run group every day of the week, and I would just go and do whatever they were doing.
That's
And
so
some
cool.
of them were really fast, and it would be like an
Mhm.
easy 6 mile run, which for me was probably at tempo or faster than tempo. And I would do that and had no clue. And then I was like, oh, I missed the track. I want to get involved in track. And so one of my friends told me she had read about this track group that met every morning and that it was open on Tuesdays. And we go, and it was the most insane workout I had ever heard in my life. Come to find out that it was a group of semi pro triathletes who
Whoa. Do you remember a specific track workout from this group, or did you only go once?
Oh, I we went a few times, but my friend and
Okay,
I were
good
always in
for
the
you.
back. Like it was laughable. Like we would be getting laughed. I remember I think the first day it was like 4-mile repeats and then a ladder and followed by like a slight tempo. And they were like, but you guys don't have to do that part because you're new. And I was like, oh, that's the only part we don't have to do. Okay. um
4 by 1 mile repeat is like a workout. A
yeah,
ladder is also a workout, and a
I know.
tempo is a third workout.
Yeah. And I was like, clearly you guys are the ones who do 3 sports in one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just, that was sums it up. Like I had no idea what I was doing. I was letting other people dictate what my racing and running and training looked like. There was no rhyme or reason to what I was doing. And
Yeah.
so I was improving, but little did I know that I was on a path toward total burnout, which happened after I moved to Florida, which was pretty soon after that. And everything just changed when I made the move back to be closer to family in Florida. I think everything kind of hit me at once with the burnout, the underfueling, overtraining, and then you add in 95 degrees and 99% humidity on top of it. And it was a pretty harsh awakening for me for sure.
Yeah, and were you I definitely want to get to that. Were you living in Florida before you moved to DC and then moved back to Florida, or were you living
Yes.
somewhere else? Okay.
I was living in Florida first. I've grown up in Florida, so
Yeah.
I should be used to the heat. But I had never trained outside of high school, which I feel like, I don't know, when you're younger, you can just adapt to the heat faster.
Yes,
Um,
you can.
okay, good. I'm glad that's validated. And then I moved to DC, and it's like, oh, you get 4 seasons. And yes, there's hot summers, but you get a break with the fall and you see how much you've improved over the summer. But instead, coming back to Florida, it was like, oh, I feel like I'm gunning it and I'm barely able to hold paces at all. And it was very, very hard on me mentally to like see that and not know what to do or how to get around that.
Yeah, it's like for so long you were able to hold this higher stress, right? With stress with underfueling, very, very common with new runners. It's just common with runners in general. And the stress from running with groups every single day and maybe running a little bit faster or a lot faster than you could be or should be, right? With what we know now. And then you throw in like really tough workouts. And you were able to sustain that and make that work. And you added one
Yeah.
more thing, which is heat and humidity. And your body was like, nope, can't do this. Can't do it. How long
Can't
did
do
it
it.
take when you moved to Florida for you to like realize that something was going on? And kind of what were those red flags that you were starting to experience?
Yeah, I've done a lot of reflecting on this now that I've come back to the sport. And it's really interesting because I think I didn't know when I was in it what was happening.
Mhm.
I felt like I had lost my community. There, I just didn't have the same level of running groups in Tampa. I have, she's one of my closest friends now, but it was like I had one friend who I ran with instead of, hundreds of people. I The heat and just not slowing down, I think ego got into my way a little bit where it was like, no, I can
Mhm.
hold this pace. And it was making every run miserable. I wasn't enjoying it. A lot
Yeah.
of the joy was being stripped out. And that is looking back, like when you lose your joy for it, that is a huge, huge red flag. And
Mhm.
um, I didn't know. I was like, oh, maybe I'm just not the athlete I thought I was. Like that was the thinking that came up. And so there was a lot of anger and disappointment in
Mm.
myself, um, which then as a type A overachieving personality, it was like, oh, well, if running's making me feel bad about myself, then I don't want to do it. Maybe it's just not for me right now. So, I think those were a lot of the red flags that came up, and I would sign up for races and I would train for the races, but then after the race I would stop for weeks and months. And I got into this cycle for a while, probably from 2012, well, 2013 to 2018, where it was like sign up for a race, train for it half
Wow.
heartedly, not get the result I wanted, be upset and disappointed. So don't run, and then do it
Yeah.
all over again. And yeah, that was really hard. It was really hard.
What was bringing you back into the training and racing season? Like if you would go through maybe a half-hearted training cycle, right? Because I think anytime a runner isn't feeling good consistently, it's a very difficult place to be because you've had those high highs or you've had that consistency before and you're like, well, what's different now? Like,
Yeah.
why can't I do this now? And it can be a really tough thing to go through. And it's one of those things, too, where you never really know how long it's going to take to flow through it and to get through it. What was bringing you back to racing each and every time throughout that 5-6 year period?
My love, my true love of the sport, and not
Yeah.
just running for me, but I grew up, like I said, with my family. They're all from Boston. So we used to watch Boston Marathon Monday, and my mom and we would watch the Olympics and watch the track and field events. And, I knew the names of all the elite runners. Like, I loved the sport and I identified. I mean, runner, like, if I had introduced myself, it was, I'm Meg, I'm a runner. Like, it was such a huge part of my identity, and I wasn't ready to give that up. Kinsey too. Like, she's like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
And I felt that. And so it was like I was clinging, grasping desperately. Like, if I do this race, it'll come back. I will want
Yeah.
that again. But I didn't realize that I had to make changes and I had to make running work with my life and for me instead of me trying to force it to work the way it had been.
Yeah. That's a really interesting like realization because I think we can get in that space of like wanting running to be a certain way or to go a certain way to be the thing that we want it to be. And sometimes, most times, I mean, a lesson that my coach has been talking to me about for about the last month is like letting go. And I have to let go of the expectation and just like bring things down a few notches to see what can develop from that and releasing that. Like, it's almost like this control or wanting, like really wanting to see an outcome and really trying to dictate how we get there.
Yeah, I love that. I wish someone had
Yeah.
told me that. I wish I had you, like, or, that life. And I think
Yeah.
and I did that. And I remember I ran the 2018 Disney World Marathon.
Mhm.
And for the first time in years, I had pure joy. I ran
Mhm.
that 26.2 miles with a smile on my face the whole time. It was my
That's so
slowest marathon,
fun.
the slowest one I have run, but it was the most fun. And I remember finishing, I was engaged, we were getting married the next month, and I was kind of like, you know what? I think I think I need a break. I think I want to go out on a high note. I like the marathon was great. It was great
Yeah.
weather. It was like 45 degrees. And I was like, I'm good. You know what? I think running and I need a little bit of a break for now. And that was a very like distinct decision for me at that point.
What do you think was about what do you think was behind that decision versus, the other side of that coin would be like the greed of wanting that feeling again. Because that's a trap I fall into of like, I just want to keep going because I want to keep continuing this. What was it about that race that made you say, like, no, that I feel satisfied?
I think it was just the timing and knowing like
Mm,
my wedding was happening in six
yeah.
weeks, knowing that we were going on a month-long honeymoon that year. It felt like I had other things in my life to look forward to.
Yeah.
and be excited about. And I knew I would still go out for runs every now and then, but I felt like that I wasn't going to sign up for any races. I wasn't going to go through specific training. And then from 2018 through now, I mean, we kind of know what happened, but it was like I had two kids and then a global pandemic happened and the world changed and I was adjusting to life as a mom and a working mom and a mom of two and working
Yeah.
from home. So it was very different. So it was like a break that I didn't think was going to last as long as it did. But then the world decided that maybe I needed a longer break.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you like, and that's okay too. I think there's a lot of things in life that kind of redirect us here and there with where we're really supposed to be, right? Were you still moving, like incorporating like movement into your days? Was that still something that you wanted to do? Or was it really investing more in, you're newly married, you're thinking about having kids, now you are having kids, and also living and being in a global pandemic, definitely not as easy to get movement. And were you still incorporating that or not so much?
Yes, but it wasn't as frequent or regular.
Mhm.
Especially once I got pregnant with my first child, my boy Gabe. It was a very difficult pregnancy. I thought I was going to be the pregnant woman who was running up until the day she went into labor.
Yeah.
And I ran through my first trimester, again, off and on, not very consistent, like 20, 30 minutes. And unfortunately, I got put on bed rest about halfway through my pregnancy with Gabe.
Mm.
And that was, I mean, I went from, being a pretty active human to like, you can't even, you have 15 minutes a day to like get up and go shower. And I was like, oh. And so I think the difficult pregnancy and then after I had Gabe, having that and going through a lot of that trauma, I ended up with pretty severe postpartum depression and anxiety. And
Mm.
um, I just movement wasn't even in my realm of possibility. Like I was just in a survival mode. Um, and
Yeah.
trying to take care of this tiny human while also taking care of myself. And we were in the pandemic at that point, and eventually I was like, I have to get outside. I have to at least see the world. And so I started going on daily walks with Gabe. And
Yeah.
those eventually turned into like pretty slow walk runs, but at least something. And that was a huge part of my healing. So, movement, even though it
Mm.
wasn't consistent during that phase, it's always been really important to me. And finding again that way to make it work in that season of life, whatever it might look
Yeah.
like.
I really love the way you said that. It's like movement is medicine, right? And going through what you went through during a global pandemic is I can't even imagine. That had to be like a very dark time for you. And like getting outside and getting that fresh air and having that daily movement and really like doing the best that you could do each day and seeing kind of like the progress with it too, of like maybe the walks are a little bit longer. Now we're doing a run walk. I mean, that's so incredible. And it's something that doesn't come easy either. You have a lot going on. There's a lot of emotions and there's a
Yeah.
lot of things. There's a lot of newness to all of it. Um, so big kudos to you for getting out there and like doing what you could do each and every day.
Yeah. And I think just grace, right? And grace for
Mhm.
myself and for others. And I think it's especially for women and talking to like the mom runners out there, it's like it's so easy to see, especially on social media, like, someone 6 weeks postpartum, they got cleared by their doctor and they're out running. And it's okay if that's not your path or your journey.
Mhm.
And it took a long time for me to realize that because I wasn't ready at 6 weeks with my first baby. And I actually wasn't ready until almost 9 months with my second. So it was like a span of almost
Yeah.
3 years until I felt ready to like get back into running and training. Um, and I was a little hard on myself with that, but now I look back and all I want to do is help other moms like feel like it's okay.
Mm.
It's your journey, your path, and it doesn't have to look like anyone else's. Um, and giving yourself grace to be okay with that was a big part of learning for me, for sure.
Yeah. That's a huge lesson I think we all can learn from, even in life. Like every journey is so different. Marathon training is so different, right? You and I could be training for the Chicago Marathon and have totally different training and run the exact same time, right? And it's same is true for life, being a new mom, when you're going to start running again, and really like when your mind and body are ready to start running again. How did you know it was time to incorporate running again?
Such a good question. I think it was just like after such a long break, my body was craving movement.
Mm, yeah.
And then I had these two small, tiny humans, and I just kept thinking about as they get older, I want to be able to chase them. I want to be able to run with them. You know, if my son or daughter like, "Oh, I want to go for a run with you, mom." I want to be able to do that. So they really became my why of I want to be healthy and active for them and so that I
Mm,
can be there for them, but also to show them and instill in them a love of movement and sport and athleticism, whatever that might be for them, and to see like their mom working for her health, working for goals. So it was about 9-10 months postpartum, and it was a slow journey. Like I think I started
mhm,
off with working out 3 times a week, 20 to 30 minutes in our living room, just doing what I could do with the time I had. And
mhm.
gradually it was like, oh, what if I added on a 2 mile treadmill run? And then it was, what if I put the babies in the stroller and do walk runs? Which was fun.
Yeah,
And I think from there, I started to make little goals for myself. Like, oh, what if I
yeah.
could, start running 5 miles on Saturday and work that up and see how that goes. So it was a very slow process and it was completely mine. And I'm so proud of that. I
Mhm.
didn't, for once in my life, I didn't get caught up in the comparison game. Like I made it my journey, which is really, really a good thing to do.
It really is for the body, the soul, the mind, like for
Yes.
every single aspect of life. And I'm so proud of you for doing that too. It can be extremely difficult, especially if you had friends who were having babies and getting back out there earlier than you. But I love the way that you progressed into it because it's the same way that you can progress into like coming back from if you are injured or starting a new training program and just slowly but surely do what you can, create a system, create a schedule, get that consistency down, and then just start to build. And how much like did that 5 mile long run to you on a Saturday just feel like true triumph? You're like, I just crushed a 5 mile run. Like, how good did
Yes.
that feel?
Oh my God. I remember I was like, oh, I feel like I've been living in the 20-30 minute zone for years, like since that 2018 marathon. And this was 2023. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I just ran a half, like to me, it was like the equivalent of running a half marathon. I was like, I
Yeah.
pushed myself and did something that I didn't think I was ever going to really do again.
Yeah. And that's so cool. And it's almost like taking you right back to the beginning of running, maybe not so much in middle school and high school when you were like secretly hoping to trip over that route in
Yeah.
cross country. I've been there. I also ran cross country for about 2.5 weeks. I couldn't. couldn't handle it. I was also a track star.
Oh,
I love the track in high school. And it's just so funny how things change.
no.
Um, but like how it kind of comes full circle where you're like, yes, this 5 mile run is like, it feels good, right? Like your body is like healing or
Yes.
was healed when you started. So
Yeah.
like you're feeling good. You have those endorphins again and you're creating a lot of confidence. And that's how it all starts, right?
Yes.
Right back to the beginning.
Yep. Because then it was like, oh, well, what if I do 5 miles for 2 weeks and then I'll do 2 weeks of 6 miles and then 2 weeks of 7 miles? And little did I know I was building myself a little mini training plan.
Yeah.
And decided like, okay, if I can get to 7 miles and feel good, then I want to run a half. And if I do that, I want to do it smartly and with,
Mhm.
the support of a coach who can help me be smart and thoughtful in all the ways that maybe I hadn't been, because I did not want to end up in a place of burnout because I love this sport so much and I want to be doing it for a long time.
Yeah. This gets to be a sport that we do as long as we want to do it. That's what I believe. Like, I really don't want the body or the mind to dictate that, right? And the more that we can create that like joyful, fun environment, while still like reaching some goals that we have, whether that's process and or outcome goals, like to me, that's such a sweet balance. Um, so then you were okay, so we're back to coaching, looking for a coach. I believe that's maybe when we connected last summer.
Yes, yes.
I still remember exactly where I was when I took that call, and
I do too.
and yeah, yeah. And so kind of walk us through like what you were thinking in kind of this time frame of looking for a coach and kind of like what maybe fears were coming up with that.
I think for me, it was what I was just so afraid of burning out. I was so afraid of going too
Mhm.
hard. I think I had also I was being so consistent, and I honestly hadn't been that consistent in years. And I was
Yeah.
like, if I miss one day, I'm gonna blow it. Like I want someone who can help support me through that thinking. And I think at that time I found the Elevate podcast and I binged like every episode and was thinking like,
That's so great.
okay, this philosophy really works for me. So let me reach out. So it was one like almost preventative. But then I started to think about what can I do? What would happen if I push myself? Um, what does it look like if I just get curious and think about what can I do as this mom, as this working, woman who has other passions and interests, like what is out there for me? Um, and so that all of those started to come up and I felt like I really wanted the support and guidance of a coach, one who it's not just about running, it's about running and life and joy. And so I started to feel like it was the right time to really go all in on some goals that I've had for a long time and I was been too afraid to even say out loud.
I know. I remember like this could have been on the intake call or maybe it was our first coaching call. And you're like, yeah, I want to run a half marathon sub 2 hours. And that's a great goal, right? That's a great goal. But I'm looking at Meg's runs and I'm like, oh no, Meg, we can shoot a little higher than that. Like you're running like so a 2 hour half is a 909 pace. And I'm like, you're basically running that now in training runs. I think we can make this like fun and really like see what's there. And you were like all over that. You're like, yeah, like maybe a little hesitant, but also like, let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's such a great thing too about running, and like confidence can be such a big
Mhm.
part of it. And a lot of times running can give you that confidence, which is great, but sometimes you need outside support to like help you be confident in what you can do as a runner, whether that's a coach or your running group.
Yeah.
So I love that aspect of it too.
Yeah, it's like the coach or um yeah, if you're working with a coach or if you have someone looking over your training, or maybe it's your spouse or your running group or your neighbors like giving you that confidence, right? With a coach, you have someone looking over the plan, looking over the data and looking over the human. Some coaches over the human. I'm one of those coaches, like looking over all these different pieces and then building it up, right? So I had like this 10,000-foot view of what was going on. And I'm like, oh, wow, if you want to go for something a little bit stronger, it's there. And you
Yeah,
leaned in
I
and you
did.
created a lot of fun over this cycle.
Yeah, so much fun. I mean, so much
Some
fun.
worm races and some like strong, really strong halves and 10Ks. Um, what was like one of the most surprising things that you experienced with your postpartum running?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think it was how different it was from before in two
Mm-hmm.
ways. One, the physical way of it is like your body feels totally different. You're like, whoa, okay, how so I have to be more thoughtful about, strength training and core and being on top of that. And
Yeah.
then the other part was the
Mm.
mental side. I am so surprised at the growth I've had in terms of mental strength and mindset. Um,
Yeah.
and maybe it's that saying of like, once you've had a child, you can do anything. But I also think it's this perspective of like, as a mom, I want my kids to believe in themselves. I want them to have a toolbox that they
Mm,
can go to when they're feeling overwhelmed or like they're struggling. And because I want that for them, I want that for myself. And it's in running when I am tempo runs are not my friend. I'm learning to love them. I'm learning to
no,
love them.
we're
But I've
working
been
through it,
we're
everyone.
working through it. But I was intimidated by tempo runs
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
got a little nervous when like they kept coming up on my training plan and but I with working through you it's like I get to be curious. I get to
Yeah.
practice this tool set of what can I do when things get hard? How can I be my
Mhm.
own champion? And at the background, my children were there of like, I want them to have that too. Um, and so, I think those are some of the most surprising things is just how much my mental side and my perspective shifted coming back postpartum of there's something I'm doing this for more than just myself. And it's not just getting that faster time or that faster PR, but it's
Mhm.
how do I use running to help me be a better human, a better partner, a better mom. And it was really
Yeah.
incredible the impact it's had across my life in so many areas.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that it's a domino effect. And if you can feel strong and capable in something like running, and maybe it's another hobby too, it can just seep into everyone around you and it inspires them to maybe step outside of their comfort zone and do something. And it's such a cool way that we can show up and kind of give back to people in some ways. I remember on our call, you mentioned you really wanted, like, you felt like you needed a lot of mental strength support. And over the course of like the last, I guess we started September 1st. So the last 8 months, if I'm doing the math right, you've been such a good advocate for yourself of like what you need in the moment, but also like you're doing your own research and like you're always sharing with me like the newest podcast that you listened to and what you learned from it and how you applied it to like usually it is the tempo run
Yep.
and I love that because it it shows like you're not just using it in that moment when you need it, but you're also processing it after the run and thinking through it. And when you are working with a coach, typically more is always better, like knowing more about the human and how they think and how they show up. And I think that's a really cool piece to it. And so you're doing a great job on that side. So maybe it was a little bit of like, I feel like I need this, but that was like the old Meg. And the current Meg was like, I actually don't need this as much as I think I do. But you're doing a great job with like all the learning and all the support that you're doing for yourself. But I also want to give you a shout out because on your intake form, you had said, like, there's a question that I ask about, like, why are you doing this? Like, what's kind of like the end game? What's the North Star? And one of the things that you answered was it was for your kids and showing up to be a great example for them in all the different ways that when you commit to anything in life and you show up and you do it and you succeed, and then there's other days that are hard, kids are like sponges and they just like soak that up. And I think that is a really, really cool piece to the why and kind of like to that bigger kind of like reason.
Yeah. I really feel like they've been a huge part of why my
Mhm.
mindset has changed so much.
Yeah.
And I I love that I can like help my toddlers navigate tantrums using some of the tips and tricks I've learned from like running mindset. It's incredible. It's amazing. Um,
Yeah.
so I love that. And even in that half I ran, that it was like 82 degrees at the start. and
That
and
was
thing
wild.
yeah, I remember thinking like, "Oh, I'm one more mile closer to getting to hug my babies." And like that was my mantra that
Mm.
kind of got me through, and seeing them at the finish line and they were like, "Mama, you did so great." Like just that was like, "Oh, I can do anything."
Yeah, like, I did do great, and you did. You ran a great race with, I mean, heat, humidity, like, your race photos, it just, like, shows how stinking hot it was that morning.
Oh,
And I'm a big believer, like, in this, and I had a friend share this with me, so I can't take credit for it, but when he shared this with me, I was like, I love that mindset of, like, especially when it is kind of like maybe it's that run or that race that just doesn't land the way you want it to land. Um, to think back and say to yourself like, wow, earlier this morning I didn't run. Let's say in your case it's like 13.1 miles, or in my case it would be like cherry blossom. And but like now here I am a few hours later and I just did this really cool thing and I got to log all these miles and have fun in the process, or hug your kids at the finish line, or for me it was like brunch with an Elevate athlete after the race, and like kind of shifting it into like, oh cool, I ran 13.1 more miles than I did a few hours ago, or 10 miles, or whatever that is. And that's a cool way to kind of like shift or change the station on the channel a little bit. You still ran a great race though. You ran a 1:45 if anyone's curious. And that was your first of two halves over the season. And you had better weather the second time around. So that was, and I love that. And it's not just for the outcome, but it's more so of like the feeling you had while running that second one. And that's like the true strength that I want the athletes or you to feel when you're racing. Because when it's hot and humid, very similar to, kind of Boston a few weeks ago, it's, you don't really feel your true potential. And that's so sad.
yeah. Yeah, it was hard because I felt like I had put
Mhm,
in such good work, and I was really proud of
mhm.
that because I don't think I had
Yeah,
run a sub 2 half in since 2012. So, almost
yeah.
10 years. So 145 on a hot day, but it wasn't like you don't feel strong, you feel depleted. You're like
Yeah.
Worked so
You're like,
hard.
"What is it? Where are my babies?"
Yeah, like, yeah. And they were like, "You're sweaty." I was like, "Thanks, kids." But
Yeah.
and then to turn around and end my season on a
Yeah.
half, where it was, like 50 degrees. It was great. I felt strong. I negative split for the first time ever in a half
Mhm.
marathon. I just was like, oh, there's so much potential. And I'm so excited for what
Mhm.
the future holds. And when you are, a working mom and you're putting in time and maybe your partner's having to step up more, you're missing getting the kids out of the crib in the morning, it's like, oh, it was worth it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
worth like having this other aspect of my life um as part of the priorities.
Yeah. I really love that. Um, what was the hardest thing that you weren't prepared for when you returned to running after having kids? Like, what was that one thing that came up for you that you weren't necessarily thinking was going to be a thing?
I think for me it was my time used to be my own and I
Mm.
could run when I wanted to. And as a
Yeah.
mom, it's like I have a very tight window for when I get to have
Yeah.
me time and
Yeah.
when I can run and go to the gym. And I think that has actually worked in my favor because if I can't scroll too long on my phone, I got to get out the door. Whereas when your time is more of your own and you have a little more flexibility, maybe you can push things off or procrastinate a little bit longer. So I would say like it was the most difficult, but now it's probably why I'm as consistent as I have been.
I love that. Yeah, I think there was like one Friday run that didn't log in and or log through and I was on final search on Friday and I like messaged you. I'm like, "Is everything okay?" And that's when you know you're a consistent runner. If it's like, "Oh wow, this run should have been logged like 3 hours ago. What's wrong? Is everything okay?" Which is cool, right? Like that's a fun piece to it for sure. Well, how do you think have found that balance in life between doing all the things? Like you love lots of different hobbies, right? And you have a lot of interests. You're a very curious human. You are training and running 5 days a week. You're working full time inside, outside of the home. Um, and your mom and your wife and your friend and a daughter. Like there's so many different aspects to you. How do you kind of find that balance between everything?
Um, I laugh. It's been hard, and I think I had to really shift my perspective, and it was like I might never have balance, and that's
Yeah.
okay. And I don't know where this idea came from. If I heard it somewhere or I read it somewhere, but I remember thinking of it more of creating a harmony and like the musical
Yeah.
sense. And like the
Yeah.
literal definition of a harmony is lots of disparate sounds. And there's high pitch and low pitch, and some are more prominent than others, but it's about them coming together in the right sequence to create something beautiful. Um,
Yeah.
and so for me, like that is it, right? Like sometimes running is the sound that I'm bringing to the forefront, and other times it's my family, and other times it's work. And it's and I take it day by day, and honestly sometimes hour by hour, like from 5 to 7, that's running time, that's me time.
Mhm.
From 7 to 9, it's the wild crazy morning routine with 2 toddlers and a husband, and trying to get myself ready for work. And then from 9 to 5:36, it's work and taking care of myself as I need. So it's really thinking about the ebbs and flows of those moments throughout the day. And that's sort of how I've tried to think about it. Uh,
Yeah.
it's
I
yeah.
love that. I think That's like such a great way to describe it. It's either in episode 116 with Emily Saul, or it's in episode 120 with Dr. Laura Pence, a clinical psychologist, where I asked a question about balance, and they responded with the same answer. Like, balance doesn't exist. It is this like ebb and flow of what you can do each and every day to just make it work. Right. And I love the way that you described it with music. Meg and I are both Swifties. So that's like, when as soon as you were like harmony, I'm like, Taylor.
Yes, yes. Um, yeah,
Um, yeah, go ahead.
it's really funny too. I remember I as a new mom and I was coming back to work and I was talking to a mentor of mine and I was just like, I don't know. Like I don't know how to quote unquote do it all. Like I truly do not know. And she shared this quote from this author, Nora Roberts, who she's
Mm,
like prolific. Like I don't know how this woman she does it, but she's a parent. It writes like I don't know, 2 novels a year. It's wild. And she had this incredible analogy that has stuck with me of this idea of you're always juggling balls, but you're juggling glass balls and plastic balls. And when you drop a plastic ball, it drops to
mm,
the corner, it rolls, but you can go and pick it up. But if you drop a glass ball, that glass ball shatters and you can't put it back together and you can't pick it up.
mm.
So, really being intentional with your day and your time and thinking, what is a glass ball and what is a plastic ball? And it's not like these broad categories of like family is always glass and, running is always going to
Yeah.
be plastic. It's like, okay, this speed workout on Wednesday, that is a glass ball. And I'm going to work with my husband and make sure that like his schedule allows me to do that. Whereas this recovery run, on Friday, maybe it's plastic and I can move it around a little bit as
Mhm.
needed. So I love that. I think about that all the time. I always am like, is this a glass ball or a plastic ball? It sounds wild, but it's worked.
No, I love that. I love that so much because how many of us, gosh, we just kind of take everything the same, and it can get overwhelming trying to shift things around and make things work. But if you can make segment out, like, well, what is truly something that is glass today that has to hold? What are some things that can like shift a little bit? That's a great way to approach it in training, in life. I mean, I think we all probably have very long get to lists
Yes.
right now. I mean, I'm talking to like friends and training partners, and everyone's talking about just like how much stuff they have going on. It's wild. And it's like thinking about it in that way, it just instantly lightens the load, right? It just instantly lightens the mood of like, oh, yeah, I can kind of let some things go. It's fine. I'll pick it up tomorrow. And we're going to really focus in on keeping these glass balls alive and well, and not crushing or crashing to the ground.
Yeah.
Um, we get to wrap this up. This has been an awesome, awesome, awesome conversation with you. You're so great. I just love talking to you, and you make time for like the team calls, the monthly team calls, and you're just like such a champion with the team too. Um, you were, when you were like training for races, a little bit more present on Instagram. You still are a creative and inspiring social media person to follow. And you are really big on reels. So I'd love to know, if you were to design a reel, like, come on, a 5 mile run with me, what would that reel look like?
I love this question. That's so funny. This is motivation to like get back into it because it is a good creative outlet.
I know you're so good at it, but I also get it. It's a plastic ball.
Yeah, it is a plastic ball. But I always love like one, I use Instagram to cheer others on and like find that community. But I always want like reality and I want other, especially mom runners, to know like your journey can look different. So I think a reel for me would be very like realistic. And it would probably be like starting off in the pitch black of like shuffling around my room trying to get ready in the dark and not wake up my entire family. You'd probably hear like the silence, but then some crunching on graham crackers to make sure I'm eating before I run. And then I think it would like flip to the lights being on and like being outside. And like, I would always want to highlight like the beautiful flowers. And I run by some really pretty
Yeah,
like lakes and creeks that I'd want to
me
show.
too.
And music is really important. So there'd probably be a banging Taylor Swift song like in the background. And then of course I'd finish and I would, being a Florida girl and it's getting hot, I would have to like whine about the weather and the heat just to like get that Instagram nod out there.
I love that. Yeah.
I'll have to
I can
make this
picture
up.
all of this. I can picture all of this. Yeah, like your running is really beautiful. Like you have a lot of like really awesome run views and like you get to see
Yeah.
sunrises and all the things. So it's a lot of fun to see your reels. And I also get it. There's like definitely such a big ebb and flow between like having the time and the creative space to put reels and posts and stuff together. So no pressure on getting back to it. I'm sure when you're training for Chicago, we
Oh,
might see a little bit more of you,
yes,
which is
yes.
great. And hopefully I'm accurate about that because I know like the algorithm can be a little funky. You haven't been posting
Not
as much, correct?
no, I
Okay.
definitely haven't. No, I'm definitely more in stories, and I love connecting with other
Okay.
runners there and, cheering each
Yeah.
other on as we train, so happy for to find any other runner friends.
Yeah, I know. Stories are the best and
They're
they're
so fun.
easy. You know, they can be easy. They can also take a lot of time. Um, awesome. Well, if our audience would like to follow you and connect with you on Instagram, where can they find you?
Yeah,
What's your handle?
my handle is Meg Runs the World, which is because I love to travel and hopefully want to do all the world majors. So not because I want to actually run the world, but because I want to literally run around the world.
Yeah.
So
That's so great. And you're well on your way. You have major number one coming up this
yeah,
fall. I'm saying it's my favorite. I hope you have a great experience there. Thank you so much for your time
yeah.
today, Meg. I
Thank you
really
so much for the
appreciate
great
you.
conversation. I appreciate you too.
You're welcome. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.